Rehearsal dinner was supposed to be the easy part. That's what my fiancé kept saying the whole drive over. "It's just dinner, Vivian. My mom made her pot roast. Relax." He said it the way people say things they've already decided are true before they've checked. I remember smoothing my dress in the passenger mirror. Navy wrap dress, his mother's suggestion from 3 weeks earlier when she'd texted me a photo from a Nordstrom catalog. "This would look lovely on you for the dinner." I'd bought it without thinking much about it. I was 31, a licensed civil engineer at a firm in Charlotte, and I had spent the last 2 years loving a man who made me feel, most of the time, like the luckiest woman in a room. Most of the time. The house was warm and loud when we walked in. His parents' place in Ballantyne, a suburb that took itself very seriously. Wide driveways, fresh mulch, the kind of neighborhood where everyone had the same mailbox by silent agreement. His mother hugged me at the door, both hands on my arms, looking me over the way you look at a piece of furniture you're deciding where to put. "You look wonderful," she said. "That color is perfect for you." It was her color suggestion. I smiled and said thank you. His sister was already there, positioned at the kitchen island like she'd been holding that spot since morning. She was 3 years older than my fiancé, worked in commercial real estate, and had a way of entering conversations that made you feel like she'd been mid-sentence before you arrived. Her husband was somewhere in the living room talking football. Their 2 kids were thundering upstairs. The house had the specific organized chaos of a family that had run this play 100 times. I helped carry things to the table. I poured iced tea when his mother asked. I laughed at his father's story about a fishing trip in the Outer Banks that I'd already heard twice. I was doing everything right. I was, in the language of that house, being easy. We were halfway through dinner when his sister set down her fork and folded her hands. She does this before she speaks. I'd noticed it before. That small, deliberate pause, like she's granting the room permission to listen. "So," she said, "now that things are getting official, I think it's a good time to talk about how things work in our family." I looked at my fiancé. He was cutting his pot roast. "Mom has always been the center of this family," she continued, "the one who keeps track of everything. Dad's appointments, the holidays, making sure people stay connected. It's a full-time job, honestly, and she's been doing it alone for years." She smiled at her mother, who smiled back. "When a woman marries into this family, she becomes part of that. It's how we've always done it. It's what makes us close." She said it like she was describing a lovely heirloom, like she was handing me something precious. I waited for the rest. I thought there might be a but, a qualifier, a laugh to signal the absurdity of what I thought I'd just heard. There wasn't. "Of course we'd start slow," she added, reaching for her wine glass. "Coordinate the family calendar, help Mom with some of the correspondence, make sure Dad's medical appointments are tracked. The small things. But consistently. That's the key word. Consistency." I became aware of the sounds in the room. The refrigerator hum, a fork scraping ceramic, one of the kids upstairs dropping something heavy. "I'm sorry," I said, and my voice came out more measured than I felt. "Are you describing responsibilities you expect me to take on? Ongoing, regular ones?" "It's not about obligation," his mother said gently from the head of the table. "It's about belonging, being woven in." I looked at my fiancé again. He was looking at his plate. "I want to make sure I understand," I said, keeping my voice level. I had learned, in 12 years of working in engineering rooms where I was often the only woman, that the most dangerous thing you can do when you're angry is sound like it. You're describing coordinating your parents' schedules, managing their medical appointments, handling family communications as a regular ongoing role. For me, after we're married, it's what women in this family do, his sister said, and the word women landed like a door shutting. "Right," I said, "and what do the men in this family do?" The silence was different this time. Sicker. His father cleared his throat. "We provide. We take care of the big picture." "The big picture," I repeated. I picked up my water glass and took a slow sip, mostly to give my hands something to do. "I'm curious then." I put down the earnest money and the down payment on our condo in Plaza Midwood, $87,000. I've been paying the mortgage for the past 8 months while we were planning the wedding. I looked at my fiancé. What specifically is the big picture you'll be providing that's different from what I'm already doing? His sister's composure cracked, just slightly, a tightening around her eyes. This isn't about money, she said. You brought up roles. Roles have functions. Functions have value. I set down my water glass. I'm just trying to understand the organizational structure of this arrangement. His mother reached across and touched my hand. Her touch was cool and certain. Vivian, dear, you're going to understand it once you're in it. It's one of those things you feel more than you explain. You'll see. I'll see, I said. I stood up. My chair scraped back, and I felt every person at that table watch me do it. I appreciate dinner, I said, picking up my purse from the back of the chair. I think I need some air. I walked through the kitchen, past the island where his sister had been stationed all evening, and out the side door. The garage smelled like motor oil and cardboard boxes. I stood in it for about 30 seconds before I pushed out into the driveway. The night air in Ballantine in October is the kind of clean that makes you feel more awake than you want to be. I stood next to my car and breathed. My phone buzzed before I could decide what to do next. My fiancé, come back inside. You're making a scene. I stared at that message for a long moment. Making a scene. I had asked 2 questions at a dinner table. I had left a room. According to the man I was going to marry in 11 days, that was a scene. I got in my car. I drove to my condo. I sat at my kitchen counter for 2 hours with my laptop open to a spreadsheet I'd started 6 months earlier when we'd begun combining finances. It was supposed to be a shared budget document. He'd never once opened it. I had built it, maintained it, updated it every month. I was the one who had found our mortgage broker, negotiated the rate, read all 14 pages of the closing disclosure. He had shown up to sign. I opened a new tab and pulled up the Mecklenburg County Register of Deeds. I typed in the address. Our names came up together, which I expected, but beneath the primary deed record, there was a document I didn't recognize, a deed of trust, recorded 2 weeks after closing, listing a lien on the property. The lien holder was a name I didn't know, not a bank, a private LLC. I wrote the name down on a post-it note and stared at it. My phone had filled up with texts in the hour I'd been sitting there. His, "You embarrassed my family." Then, "This isn't who you are." Then, "I'm coming over." Then, 6 minutes later, "Let me in, Vivian. My car is outside." I didn't answer any of them. I called my best friend instead. She picked up on the second ring. She's a real estate attorney in Raleigh, and she has been my emergency contact in every sense of the word since we were freshmen at NC State. I told her everything, starting with the pot roast and ending with the lien I'd found on the deed. When I finished, she was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "Don't let him in tonight," she said. "Don't answer anything in writing. And text me that LLC name right now." I texted it. "Go to sleep," she said. "I'll call you at 8. I didn't sleep," she said. "I'll call you at 8. I lay in the bedroom I'd furnished myself, in the condo I'd bought with my own savings, and listened to my fiancé knock on the door downstairs until almost midnight. I heard him try his key and find it didn't work. I'd had the locks rekeyed 4 months after we got engaged, because I'd lost a spare and figured it was a good time. That accidental foresight felt, in the dark, like the one good decision I'd made in 2 years. She called at 7:58, "That LLC," she said, without saying hello. "It's registered to his father. It filed that lien against your property 3 weeks after closing. There's no corresponding loan documentation publicly recorded, which means either this is a sham lien filed to cloud the title, or there's a private promissory note that was never disclosed to you. Either way, it should not exist on your property without your knowledge and consent." I sat down on the kitchen floor. I don't know why the floor. It just seemed like the right altitude for this information. "How is that possible?" I said. "I was at the closing. I signed everything." "Did you read everything?" The truth was, I had read most of it. I had read the mortgage documents carefully because I'd been trained to read structural documents carefully. The deed of trust from his father's LLC had been filed separately, after closing, without me present. He had access to the property records, she said, or someone helped him file it. The closing attorney's name on the original deed. Do you remember if that was someone his family suggested? I did remember. His mother had given us a name. He's handled everything for our family, she'd said. He's wonderful. There it was. I told her. She made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Here's what we do, she said. I'm filing a motion to discharge that lien today. We're going to argue it was filed without your consent and without legitimate consideration. I'm also sending a certified letter to the closing attorney putting him on notice that we're aware of the irregularity and that we'll be filing a complaint with the state bar if this isn't resolved. And Vivian. Yeah. You need to cancel the wedding. I already knew that, but hearing it out loud in my best friend's voice made it land differently. It sat in the kitchen with me and took up space. 11 days, I said. I know. Some deposits you're going to lose. Consider it the cost of not making the biggest legal and financial mistake of your life. I made coffee. I started a list. I called the venue first, then the photographer, then the caterer. I explained there had been a significant change in circumstances. 3 of the 4 were understanding. The 4th wanted to argue. I put him on hold and sent him an email with the polite legal language my best friend had dictated while I made my second cup of coffee. My fiancé showed up at my office at 10:30. My firm is a mid-sized civil engineering company on South Tryon Street. I have my own office, glass-walled, which means I saw him in the lobby before he saw me. He was in the jacket he wore when he wanted to look serious, and he was holding coffee from the place near his apartment. 2 cups, which was either a peace offering or a prop. Probably both. My assistant called my extension. Your fiancé is here, do you want me to send him up, I said, and close my office door when he leaves. He sat down across from my desk without being invited. He put one of the coffees in front of me. I didn't touch it. You're being irrational, he said. This was apparently his opening. Tell me about the lien, I said. Something shifted behind his eyes. It was fast. A half-second recalibration, but I'd seen it before. I just hadn't known what I was looking at, what lien. The deed of trust filed against my condo 3 weeks after closing, filed by an LLC registered to your father, the one that gives him a secured claim against a property I paid for. He opened his mouth, closed it. The closing attorney was your family's attorney, I said. I'd like you to explain the part where I wasn't told about this. It's for liability protection, he said, and the phrase had the sound of something rehearsed. My dad's accountant suggested it. It's a standard structure when there are multiple financial interests in a property. You were going to be family. It was going to be ours anyway. I put in $87,000, I said. You put in 12. Your father's LLC has a secured lien on a property I own. How does that protect me? It protects the family's investment. Your family didn't invest in my property, I said. I did. He pivoted then, the way he always did when he ran out of ground to stand on. He reached across the desk and put his hand over mine. His voice went soft and careful, and I recognized that shift too. The shift to the version of him that had made me fall in love in the first place. The warm one. The one with good timing and genuine laugh lines. Vivian, he said. I love you. My family is just overprotective. The dinner last night, that was my sister doing too much, like she always does. She doesn't speak for me. I should have stopped her and I didn't, and I'm sorry for that. But the legal stuff, that's just paperwork. It can be changed. What can't be changed is us. Don't throw us away over a filing. I looked at his hand on mine. I thought about the spreadsheet he'd never opened. The closing disclosure I'd read alone at my kitchen table. The dress I'd bought because his mother had texted me a catalog photo. The way I'd been doing the work of both of us, silently, and calling it partnership. It's not a filing, I said. It's a pattern. I moved my hand. He left 20 minutes later. He didn't take the coffee. My best friend drove up from Raleigh that afternoon, which is the kind of thing she does, and we sat at my counter until midnight going through every document I had. She had already filed the motion to discharge the lien. She'd also, without telling me, pulled the financial records on the LLC and found that it held liens on 2 other properties connected to his family, both filed after major purchases by women who had married into the family. His ex-wife. His cousin's ex-wife. His cousin's ex-wife. I sat with that for a long time. This is a system, she said, not unkindly. It's been done before. They know what they're doing. He knows, I said. It wasn't a question. She didn't answer. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Over the next 4 days, the calls started. His mother first, a voicemail that began with Vivian, sweetheart, and ended with, we're all so worried about you. His sister called twice, hung up both times without leaving a message. His father called once and said in a very even tone that he hoped I understood the consequences of making accusations against his business interests and that his attorney would be in touch. I had 17 missed calls on the 3rd day, mostly him. I didn't answer any of them. On the advice of my best friend, I sent one text to my fiancé, all communication through my attorney. Her contact is below. Then I forwarded him her card. He showed up at my building lobby again 2 days later. I watched him on the intercom camera. He stood there for a long time. Then he left. The lien was discharged 11 days after my best friend filed. The closing attorney, faced with a formal bar complaint and a letter from her firm on official letterhead, moved with remarkable speed. He filed a corrective deed. He sent a letter stating the original lien had been filed in error. My best friend framed that letter. She texted me a photo of it hanging above her desk. My newest favorite piece of art, she wrote. I listed the condo 3 weeks after the wedding date that didn't happen. The Plaza Midwood Market was healthy that spring, and I got above asking. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a coffee shop on the day of closing and stared at the wire transfer confirmation on my phone for a long time. I'd bought that condo at 29 with money I'd saved since my first paycheck at 23. It had been mine before I knew him. It was still mine after. I found my new apartment in Noda, a 2-bedroom on the 2nd floor with exposed brick and a fire escape I'd decided to put plants on. It had no history I needed to untangle. It was, in the specific way of fresh spaces, just itself. I spent the first month quiet, not sad exactly, more like recalibrating. The way your ears adjust after a long flight, that slow equalization. I went to work. I finished a bridge load analysis that had been sitting on my desk for 3 weeks. I cooked actual meals for the first time in months, the kind where you chop things and use more than one pan, because suddenly I had the room in my head for it. My best friend called every few days. She didn't ask how I was doing, which I appreciated. She just talked to me like I was already fine, which is a specific kindness. I got a text from his sister in the 2nd month. No preamble. You hurt my brother badly. I hope you're proud of yourself. I looked at it for a while. I thought about the LLC. I thought about the 2 women before me. I thought about the pot roast dinner and the fold of her hands and the word consistency. I didn't reply. I showed it to my best friend. She saved it to the file she kept, which at this point was fairly thick. I started running in the mornings. I don't know why. I'd never been a runner. But I found that there was a particular quality to early morning Charlotte, before the commuters, when the light was flat and the streets were mostly empty, that made me feel like I was somewhere that didn't know my name yet. I liked that. I ran further each week. The thing about almost marriages is that they don't end in a single day. They end in small retrievals. The box of his things by the door, then a second box 2 weeks later when you find more. The email you send to change beneficiaries on your 401k, the slow realization that the plans you made for next year, the trip to Colorado, the furniture you were going to buy together, were only ever yours anyway because you were the one who planned them. In March, I ran into a woman at a continuing education seminar for licensed engineers. She worked in structural consulting in Concord, and we ended up at the same lunch table by default and stayed there by choice. She was funny and blunt and had an opinion about every structural code amendment I'd ever been annoyed by. We exchanged cards. We got lunch the following week on purpose. Her name was Adele and she had, it turned out, her own version of a story, not identical. Different architecture, same load-bearing problem. She'd spent 3 years in a marriage that slowly, methodically made her feel smaller than she was. She'd gotten out 18 months earlier. She was, in the way of people who've done hard things and come out the other side, remarkably clear. We started talking about it more seriously over a second lunch, then a third. About what we wished we'd known. about the specific ways financial control gets dressed up as love and tradition, about how many women in our professional circles had versions of the same story they didn't talk about because they were embarrassed about having missed it. "We didn't miss it," Adele said, pulling apart a breadstick with more force than necessary. "It was hidden." There's a difference. I thought about that for a long time. I called my best friend that night. "I want to start something," I said. "An education resource. For women. For anyone. Navigating joint finances before marriage. What to look for, what to ask, what documents to actually read. Where the trapdoors usually are, like a financial literacy nonprofit. Combined with legal access, workshops, plain language guides, a network of attorneys willing to do initial consultations on a sliding scale so it's not just available to the people who can already afford to protect themselves." She was quiet for a second. "You've been thinking about this for a while." "Since about midnight on a kitchen floor," I said. She laughed. "Send me a draft proposal. I'll tear it apart in a loving way." I named it Clear Title. Not because it was clever. Because it was accurate. Because what I'd spent the last 6 months doing was clearing title on a piece of property and on my own life. The first workshop we ran was in a conference room at the Mecklenburg County Public Library on a Thursday evening. 14 people showed up. We covered the basics: how to read a closing disclosure, what a deed of trust means, the difference between joint tenancy and tenants in common, why prenuptial agreements aren't only for the wealthy, and why the word prenup shouldn't feel like an accusation. A woman in the second row raised her hand at the end. She was maybe 26, with the kind of bright, nervous energy of someone who'd come because they half expected to need this. "My fiancé says a prenup means I don't trust him," she said. I thought about what to say and settled on what was true. "A prenup is a conversation," I said. "It's two people sitting down with their whole actual lives and deciding together how to handle them. The person who refuses to have that conversation isn't protecting the relationship. They're protecting themselves from scrutiny." She wrote something in her notebook. I watched her write and thought about the navy dress I'd bought because someone texted me a catalog photo and I hadn't thought to wonder why. We ran the workshop again the following month. 31 people. The month after that, a community foundation in Charlotte reached out about funding. My best friend called it traction. Adele called it about time. I called it a start. I was on my fire escape with coffee on a Saturday in April, watching the Noda street wake up below me, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. I'm glad I did. It was a woman in Greensboro. She'd read about Clear Title in a local online newsletter. She was 2 weeks out from her own wedding, she said, and she'd found something strange in the paperwork on the house they were buying together. Her fiancé's uncle had been added to the deed without her knowledge. She didn't know if it was intentional. She didn't know if it was intentional. She didn't know what to ask. "It might be nothing," I told her, "but it's worth knowing for sure. Let me give you my attorney's number. She can look at what you have in 30 minutes and tell you where you stand." "I'm scared," she said. "What if it's something?" "Then you'll be scared and informed," I said. "That's better than the alternative." She called me back 10 days later. It had been something. She'd postponed the wedding, asked for a corrected deed, had a very hard series of conversations. She sounded, on the phone, the way I had felt in March. Not happy exactly, but clear. "Thank you," she said. I didn't know who else to call. "That's the whole point," I said. I went back inside, poured more coffee, and sat down at my desk where the Clear Title articles of incorporation were still open on my screen, waiting for a final review before I filed them with the state. I read them through one more time. Every line. No one was doing me the favor of explaining anything quickly. I'd learned to be slower than that. I signed where it asked me to sign. I filed before noon. The plants on my fire escape were doing well, for the record. Better than expected. It turns out some things grow fine without a lot of fuss, given the right amount of light in a place that's actually theirs. I used to think the hardest part of that whole thing was the rehearsal dinner. The moment his sister folded her hands and started reading out my future like a job posting. But the more time passes, the more I think that wasn't the hard part at all. The hard part was the months before it. The months where I kept smoothing things over, buying the dress someone else picked out, laughing at stories I'd heard twice, and calling all of it being easy. I was doing what a lot of us are trained to do, shrinking in small enough increments that you don't notice the room getting smaller. What I've come to understand is that nothing that happened to me was sudden. It was built incrementally, the same way a load gets distributed across a structure. A little weight here, a small assumption there, until the whole thing is carrying something it was never designed to hold. The lien on my property didn't appear overnight. The expectation that I would run his parents' lives didn't arrive with the engagement ring. These things were already in place before I said yes. They were waiting. That's the part I think about most. Not his family's calculation, though it was calculated, but my own willingness to not look too closely. I had spent years learning to read engineering documents with precision and care. I could find a load discrepancy in a structural drawing in under a minute. And yet I had signed a closing disclosure in a room with a family attorney I hadn't vetted because someone I loved said it would be fine. Intelligence doesn't protect you automatically. You have to actually use it, on purpose, even in the situations where using it feels unromantic or suspicious or unkind. That's the thing nobody tells you. Asking questions is not a failure of trust. It is trust, real trust, applied correctly. Trust that the person you're building a life with can withstand the same scrutiny you'd give any other major decision. When I finally asked those two questions at the dinner table, what are the specific duties and what is your role? I wasn't being difficult. I was doing, for the first time, what I should have been doing all along. I was reading the actual document instead of the summary someone else handed me. Adele said it best. Over a lunch we've now had probably 30 times, we didn't miss it. It was hidden. I've held on to that, because there's a version of this story where I spent years believing I was naive, foolish, too trusting. And that version keeps women quiet. It makes the lesson be more suspicious instead of you deserved honesty and didn't get it. Those are not the same lesson. What I know now is that resilience isn't the ability to absorb hard things without reaction. It's the ability to respond rather than collapse, to take what happened and do something purposeful with it rather than just surviving it. The woman who called me from Greensboro 2 weeks from her own wedding, terrified and uncertain, she wasn't weak for not knowing. She was brave for picking up the phone. That's all any of us can do. Notice something? Say something. Ask someone who knows. I filed the articles of incorporation for clear title on an ordinary Tuesday morning. No ceremony, no champagne. Just a document. Read carefully, signed where asked. The plants on my fire escape were doing well. The work was just beginning. And for the first time in a long time, everything I was building was mine. Every line of it, every clause, every load-bearing wall exactly where I put it.